Representative Dan Caucus, Representative Chris Miller, and Representative Adam Nieberg. And we just wanted to kind of give you a kind of a post-election wrap-up, kind of talk about what's coming next week with veto session. I guess we can also talk about last week's veto session that was 2 days and rather uneventful. And so that's kind of where we're at. So with that, Representative Caucus, say hello.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Great to be back with you again. Last week was our veto session, and we had a big meeting on Tuesday night. So I apologize for not hitting the airwaves. We'll try to keep up with you. Next week is veto session, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We haven't seen a schedule yet. Hopefully, we'll be able to get out of there in time to maybe give you a live update from Springfield. Wrapping up, I want to thank everybody for coming out to vote. Appreciate it. Re-election in my new House district, the 88th. Kind of stretches from Decatur to Bloomington, includes all of Pike County, which we get to keep Monticello. And, this is a time for a little bit of introspection. And I think we really need to talk about what happened on election night. So we'll get to it in just a second.
Excellent, Dan. And so Representative Miller, alphabetically, you're up next. Kind of give us your thoughts and welcome.
Well, thank you, Brad, and thank you, other legislators, for joining us this evening, and for the people out there. It's good to be here, and I do want to thank you for your support there on November the 8th. I really appreciate it. I don't know, I'm not so sure, but I think everybody on the screen got 100% of the vote. If you think about that for a minute. But, the veto session is a little bit entertaining just from the fact that, this was what was on the calendar, just in case you were wondering what we were doing in Springfield. We were spending tax dollars to stimulate the economy in Sangamon County, it felt like, but it's really incredible to me, the incompetence that we see on display in real time as we all drive to Springfield thinking that we're actually going to do the people's work. And literally the calendar was blank when you opened it up. For both days in a row, we had a prayer, we had a pledge, we had several points of personal privilege. I'm not sure. I think Tom Bennett may have named a highway or something. I'm not positive. But basically, all we did was waste our time, waste your time. And for that, I apologize to you. And hopefully, if we ever get to the place where we can change the leadership in Illinois, things will be done differently, and they will actually benefit the citizens of Illinois, and we can put Illinoisans first.
Excellent. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. Nothing on the calendar. And so we're in eager anticipation of veto session next week. Certainly not last or not least, I'll just quit talking and just to turn it over to Representative Nieberg as we go through this list alphabetically. Representative Nieberg.
Thank you, Representative Halbrook, folks. Good evening. Hope everybody's having a good evening here tonight. Thank you for joining us. To elaborate a little bit on what my colleagues previously alluded to on the calendar and what we did in veto session. I was looking at the calendar. I was just trying to find it. And Chris was absolutely correct. When you open it up, nothing there. It just said notes for 2 days straight. And then they canceled session that Thursday. So we're going to go back in a week from today, I believe. And then we'll see what happens. Now, folks, you need to expect something to happen in lame duck. That's where all of the drama is supposedly going to occur. They're looking at an assault weapons ban. They're looking at expanding abortion access in the state of Illinois. So the Freedom Caucus will be standing firm on those issues, representing you, the folks here in Southern Illinois and Southeast Illinois. As far as the elections go, a couple of weeks ago, I know it was more like a red nosebleed rather than a big red wave that didn't quite hit the shore. But there is still a lot of progress to be made here in the state of Illinois, and the great state of Florida is showing how to get it done. So thanks for being with us this evening as we unpack all of this. So thank you.
Yeah, excellent. And again, I neglected to say thanks to the voters in the 107th, the new 107, for your support as we move forward. And so I guess probably the the beneficiaries of us being in Springfield last week were the hotels, motels, restaurants, and the gas stations, and maybe some other ancillary businesses were probably the main beneficiaries of our visit there last week. So we can only hope better things ahead for next week. So as we kind of change gears, election was 2 weeks ago. A lot of stuff happening. A lot of stuff didn't happen. The talking heads and pundits across the nation had predicted one thing. Polls kind of started to change. So a lot of stuff was different. I'm just going to throw it open. Whoever wants to kind of comment on their thoughts, whether locally or statewide or nationally, on what happened 2 weeks ago. And maybe we can talk a little bit about the mail-in voting, early voting, and this 14-day time frame to get all the last mail-ins counted, and kind of how that's working out for folks maybe in the state and maybe in other spots across the nation. It seems crazy to me that we put a man on the moon over 50 years ago, and some states are still counting votes. It's just, why can't we get this done in a minimum of 24 hours or less after the polls close? And here we are 2 weeks later, stuff's still happening. So with that, I'm just going to open it up. Whoever would want to kind of interject on past election stuff, start in.
Thing that I would say, once again, Illinois leads the pack as far as being embarrassing. You know, the way that we run elections here in the state of Illinois, and the way, I mean, the contrast is when you look at what happened in Florida. You know, I mean, we're the laughing stock of the nation, along with others that don't seem to be able to count their ballots. You know, and I think that one thing that we need to look at is some common sense solutions to fix these things. There isn't any reason to reinvent the wheel. Just maybe call the governor in Florida and say, hey, what did you guys do down there? And then mimic exactly what they've done. Because the longer it takes to count ballots, the more people feel like that they've been disenfranchised. But on the other hand, you know, as far as the election's concerned, I think that the results were extremely predictable, because the Democrats drew a map, and the map pretty much proved true congressionally. You know, they drew a map to give us three Congress people, and we got 3. And they drew the other districts, and they gerrymandered them with extreme accuracy. And I don't know that there was hardly any outliers in the whole process. But, you know, Illinois is broke and it needs to be fixed. The current leadership's never going to do it. And so we need to make those changes if we want to make progress going forward.
Yeah, great point. So, Chris, in Florida, they had, let's recount what happened down there. They had a hurricane, and they had an election and another hurricane. And how long did it take to get all their ballots counted, all their votes counted down there? Are they still counting because of all these hurricanes and problems? Or how long did it take them to get the votes counted in Florida with all those natural disasters?
I'm thinking they had it done by 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, you know.
On the same day of the election.
Yeah, yep. They may have even had voter ID. I'm not sure. That'd been a novel idea.
Well, one of the things that they do is demand that if you are going to vote remote, absentee, or mail-in, whatever you want to call it, that ballot has to be in the clerk's office on election day. We don't, you know, we started this, and I understand why we have a 2-week lag time, because in years and years ago, we had people stationed, a lot of military people stationed overseas. And so the only way for the mail to get here, you know, for the ballot to get back, was through the postal service, overseas postal service. So we delayed the final count to allow our servicemen and women to have a say in our elections. That's not necessary anymore. We have the internet, people can vote. It's not required. And Florida has shown us that it's not required. The ballots, if they're not in the office on election day, they're not counted. And to that point, you know, Congressman Boss has a lawsuit against the Illinois State Board of Elections on that very topic. His claim is constitutionally that ballots must be counted on election day. There's nothing in the Constitution that allows for this extended 2 week, 10 days, 6 months, whatever you want to make it. And so Mike is suing. He's got a lawsuit, and we'll see. We'll see if where this goes, and is it constitutional? I don't know. The problem is that states have the right to conduct elections. It's not a federal control, and we don't want it to be a federal control. So we'll see what happens. I think that's one of the reasons. I'll go back and talk about why things didn't go the way we thought they would go. I think there's a couple of reasons. I think, first of all, we need to look at the turnout, actual turnout and what happened. And I don't believe that the Republicans turned out in the numbers that they should have. I think our expectations were a lot higher than what actually happened. So I think that's part of it. I was reading a couple of surveys yesterday and this morning, and even though the turnout wasn't much different in the 18 to 35, the way that vote broke was different this time, and it broke solid, hard Democrat. So that, I think, was another part of this turnout, what we saw. It wasn't that the 18 to 35s actually turned out in larger numbers. It's that they turned out and voted Democrat. So I think that's something that we have to pay a lot of attention to going forward. How do we communicate with that age bracket, and how do we attract them to come out and vote for our candidates?
Well, Dan, I think that you're making a very valid point on that particular issue. When I look at Florida and I look at the leadership that Governor DeSantis has given the great state of Florida with his COVID mitigation standards, keeping businesses open, deregulation, opportunity, wage increases, anti critical race theory in schools, pushing back against the woke agenda. He turned a swing state into a solid red state. That's because he stood on principle. That's because he stood for integrity. And in the great state of Illinois, that's what we should be doing. When we look at those folks in that particular age range that you just referred to, we need to be giving them a solid reason to vote Republican. Whether it be talking about inflation or crime or schools, this age bracket is going to they're going to start paying a lot of taxes. They're going to start putting their children in school, and we have to find a way to reach them. So when you're sitting in there in that age bracket, I am a little bit older than that age bracket, but not by much. My wife and I, we often talk about our pocketbook, the fact that we haven't been able to put anything in savings for several years, especially under the Pritzker administration, because of inflation, especially under the Biden administration, because of inflation. So when we start talking about the kitchen table issues, when we tackle the issues such as Roe v. Wade head on, when we start talking about things such as parental notification, rather than shying away from them, that's the model to win elections. So when we look at Florida, we really need to look at it and really dissect what Governor DeSantis has done over the last 4 years in Florida, and really look at that and move forward. And furthermore, we do not need to be sitting down at the table with the radical leftists that call us extremists and having conversations about how we can compromise and reach the middle. Because in the middle is where we're going to lose. When we sit back and we look at critical race theory, culture responsive teaching standards, the sex ed bill, SB 818, when we look at the repeal of parental notification, when we look at Clean Energy Jobs Act, which is the Green New Deal in the state of Illinois, when we look at Amendment 1, which is going to raise taxes on everybody that is tuning in with us here this evening, those are all things that the Democrats have pushed. And we as Republicans need to stand firm and give people a reason to vote Republican again.
Good point.
Excellent
That's
point.
exactly right, Adam. And I think to your point, I think it's interesting when you look at the demographics of that age group. All they need is another 5 or 6 years, and they'll be voting Republican once they get it figured out that they've been indoctrinated and brainwashed into far left thinking through our wonderful government school system, and it's a template of their success and able to move the needle for the radical left, because these people have been radicalized and they don't even know it. The true radicals in the state of Illinois are not the Republicans, but it's the radical Democrats that have moved so far to the left. Might as well live in communist China, because those are the ideals and the philosophies that they're that they're pushing. And and when if we could just do a better job of messaging, because the ideals that make America America and the ideals that we stand for, when you think about those ideals and you think about individual liberty, about limited government, about the rule of law, about fair markets, about fiscal responsibility, about the precious sanctity of life, and peace through strength, those are kitchen table issues and kitchen table ideals that most of us live by, at least down here in Southern Illinois, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent. Those are the things that move you. And when you dissect this and understand that the radical Democrat Party has destroyed safety and security, quality education, and economic opportunity, you would have to come to the conclusion it is time for a change here in the state of Illinois.
Right.
True.
Yeah, great points, guys. When I came in the General Assembly a few short years ago, I learned about this thing that happens to where they will make legislation that says this is for counties over 3 million, or this excludes counties under 3 million. Well, there's only one county in the state of Illinois that has over 3 million people, and that's Cook County, that contains Chicago. For those that are not up to speed on geography or want to have that reaffirmed. But what's interesting is all these bad policy ideas that's been mentioned so far, CRT and the sex ed stuff, the CEJA, they carpet bomb the entire state with this stuff. Right. And I don't care what age you are, where you live in the state of Illinois, all these bad ideas that are leading to energy costs doubling, the potential and planned shutdown of our coal and natural gas electrical generating facilities, all this stuff that's coming out of Springfield from that one county and out of DC, out of the current administration, is driving up costs for everybody that lives in the state. And right. These are really bad ideas, and they need to be called out for that.
That's true. Brad, you want to talk about the consequences of this election in the House Republican caucus? What we saw, what really what was the end result on Wednesday morning?
Well, again, we've seen the third map that the majority party has drawn, and now they have, I don't know, have they elevated themselves into permanent supermajority status? Is that what's going on here? They've weighted these districts. Some of them used to be fairly competitive, and now they're less so. And we're going to go back to Springfield on the second week in January, or the second Wednesday in January. January the 11th will be inauguration day for us. And we're going to have less Republican members in the House by 4 or 5. And I'm not sure that makes much sense, but it is what it is. That's the reality of the world we live in.
I think that the maps were very well drawn. The Democrats made absolute positive that they were not going to lose seats in Congress in Illinois. They made absolute sure that they weren't going to lose a seat in the Illinois Supreme Court. And they made certain that they were never, in the next 10 years, they were not going to lose the majority in the House or the Senate. Will they stay in the supermajority? Perhaps. We'll know more in two more cycles, 2 years and 4 years down the road. But you take a look at these maps and you see these little bumps that go around a district, and they go around a district for a particular reason, and that is to include a population. It's not to make it contiguous or compact. It's to include a certain voting population. The folks that have been drawing these maps for the last 40, 50 years are very, very skilled at it. And it's going to be difficult. I think it's going to be difficult for the Republican Party on a state level, in the House, the Senate, and Congress, to get any traction in the next 10 years. It's going to, I think, or 8 years now. So I don't know. And if this continues, then we'll see the same thing in, the next census, 2030. They'll do the same thing. It's right. The only hope that we have is that they're so bold that perhaps we'll find a court that agrees with us that the maps are unfairly drawn. And they do. They disenfranchise. In our districts, they are so slanted to the Republican majority that Democrats in our district, I would think, would feel disenfranchised. They're not going to elect a Democrat in any of our House districts because of the way they're drawn, which isn't right. We should not be disenfranchising voters. I don't care what party it is.
Right.
Well, Dan, there's many of us on this call, I believe, that voted for some folks on this call. So I want to say thank you, Representative Miller, for your confidence in me and the great folks of the newly formed 102nd District. But these maps were completely egregious. And Dan, you're absolutely correct. We as legislators know what we're dealing with, and we deal with it on a daily basis. But the people of the state of Illinois, they're the ones who really pay the price for these maps. They're the ones that are paying the price for now. It looks like a 78-40 super majority. So folks, when you look up in the upper right-hand corner, it looks like on this screen, it says Illinois Freedom Caucus. What we're going to do in the next couple of years is keep the majority of folks in this state as free as we possibly can, especially in our districts. We're going to push back against the radical left. We're going to hold our own party accountable. So nothing's going to change here, except we're going to actually push harder for you.
Exactly. Well, Dan, you touched on something that we really haven't talked much about this summer when it comes to this mapping and remapping is the Supreme Court map. And,
Right.
The rep districts, the legislative districts, the Senate districts, congressional districts, by Constitution, they're redone every 10 years. But the Illinois Supreme Court map had not been redone in over 50 years. But there was a chance that they were going to lose one of the Democrat seats there. And so what did they do? They remapped the Supreme Court.
Right. They gerrymandered the Supreme Court districts just like they did ours. Mm-hmm. And then the nerve of the Chief Justice of the Illinois Supreme Court to announce this is not a political court. We do not, we don't decide cases on political bias. I'm sorry.
That's great.
It's rich. It is, isn't it, Chris?
Hilarious.
Hilarious. If we don't have political bias in the Illinois Supreme Court, why did they draw the map that way? Why did they go out and gerrymander those two Supreme Court districts that were outside the city of Chicago? Why did they need to do that if it's not a political arm of the Democrat Party?
And what did the sponsors say? It was time. We haven't done it, so it's just time to do it. Okay, yeah. Who bought that? Yeah, right.
Nobody.
100% political.
Chris, when we were going through our initial indoctrination, we went over to the Supreme Court. We sat in there, and the justices sat up front and looked down on us as freshmen, and talked about the need for more money and all the things they did. And I asked that question. I go, when's the last time you've been redrawing the maps? Is it population shifts, or is this something that you're looking at? They said, absolutely not. This, with the chaos that it would cause to change the boundaries of the Supreme Court districts, would be monumental and almost insurmountable. And then there we go. 4 years later, we got new maps. So don't tell me it's not political.
How many maps did the governor sign, guys? Was it 3? After he ran on Fair Maps, Independent Commission, did he sign? He signed 3 maps, didn't he?
Right.
3 unfair maps. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. And Dan, I don't know if you were there that day. I think you were there on that committee, the Appropriations Committee. I think it was back in the spring of 2019. Yeah. Chief Justice Ann Burke was testifying her need for the finances, a little different setting than what you were talking about. But I drilled her on this matter, questioned her about this matter of all of the not remaps for 50 years. And she argued the point about how this is so important to leave this map alone, that it was for all the regional diversity and on and on and on, why it was important to leave that. But at the very moment that it was politically expedient to change it because of fear of losing their majority. All that talk about regional and diversity and all that from a party that talks about all that stuff all the time went out the window. It's just uncanny. I don't know. Maybe you guys have a handle on that. Any thoughts?
Well, I think when
they have had to do, maybe that's the reason that her husband was driven for a second income stream or a third income stream here in the city of Chicago. But, there's just a random thought that I had. But
no, really, Chris, explain what happened there. People probably aren't aware.
That her husband, what was it, 15 or 16 federal indictments for anything from racketeering to shaking down the Burger King or whatever it was. I know it's been a long time since I looked at that, but I thought it was interesting during all of that she gets appointed to be the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Illinois. What could go wrong there? No, there's a reason why. There's a reason why we call Sangamon County the truth-free zone, and I think that this is all being exposed in real time right now.
Right. So let's just be clear. We've got the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, was married to an alderman that was and still is, right? Is he still under all these over a dozen, maybe 15, 16 federal indictment counts, and married to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court? Yeah. Surely we just made that up, right? But no.
Only in Illinois.
Only in Illinois. Guys, we're probably here in the closing minutes. I don't know if you want to add anything about the election or any closing thoughts. Maybe as we wrap this up, we're about 26, 27 minutes into this, and to be sensitive of everybody's time. Closing thoughts.
Well, thanks, Brad. Everybody, thanks for tuning in tonight. This is another one of our continuing sagas. The Illinois Freedom Caucus will be with you every Tuesday night at 7 as the schedule permits. Brad, one of the consequences of this failed election cycle in the Illinois House was the stepping down of a long-term leader, Jim Durkin. And we now have a new leader to be elected on January the 11th, formally Tony McCumbee. So we're going to see a different face, a different operation, I hope, in the Illinois House. I look forward to it. This is a time for change, and I'm very optimistic that we can see some things that are going to be done much better and differently in the next 2 years.
Exactly. Thanks, Dan. Chris, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, thanks for joining us this evening. I hope that you found this both informative and maybe a little entertaining this evening. We look forward to coming to you week by week to keep you abreast of what's happening in Springfield, and we'll do our best to do that here as the Illinois Freedom Caucus continues to shine the light on all that's going on, good, bad, and the ugly. And with that, I just want to happy Thanksgiving, and remember, we do have a lot to be thankful for. And with that, gobble gobble.
Adam, as you close out, you might want to say a couple of words for your colleague there. Blaine Wilhauer wasn't able to be with us this evening because of business obligations or things, or maybe family. But anyhow, with that, Adam.
I can firmly say that Representative Blaine Wilhauer will be right in the foxhole with us, pushing back for exactly what you stand for and what you believe in. And happy Thanksgiving to everybody that joined the call. We will continue to be the North Star of conservatism. Even though we may have lost numbers, we may be in exile, the conservative movement is alive and well. And trust me, folks, there's more conservatives in the House of Representatives on the Republican side than there were 2 years ago, because of the very actions taken by the gentleman on this call. So we'll continue to push. We'll continue to fight back. And folks, thank you very much for your support, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yeah, great points, Adam. And I think that's right. Even though there will be fewer of us in January, the complexion has been changing in the Illinois House Republicans. caucus. The complexion has been changing and it continues to change. I believe it is more and more conservative every election. We just got to kind of branch this out, and that's what's important to everybody that's listening in tonight. I would just urge you to like and share our content here, share it with your friends and neighbors and family across this great state. This is going to take everybody. Voting is not going to be enough. We've got to do all that's within us all across this great state to turn this thing around and to restore freedom and liberty, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. With that, gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Wish Blaine could be here, but I know that we hopefully will be with us next week. And stay tuned in with us, guys. If we can't be there on Tuesday night at 7 because of schedule in Springfield, we will try to get you some information as soon as possible. And again, leave us comments, questions, thoughts, concerns, whatever you might have. With that, I'm going to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you real soon. Thanks.